So this was mine and Evie's rehearsal on Tuesday for Leah's first monologue. This was our first attempt at it. So one thing that I just want to point out straight away is that I messed up on the set, because at one point Evie comes down all the way over here for a little bit of a monologue, and I forgot that the set basically ends around here. Also, I asked her to come down here, and I forgot to mention that there were the crates down here as well. Regarding the crates, what I think we're going to do is we're going to use the boxes that the Curious Incident groups are having made for their set, and use those instead of the crates, because the crates are dangerous, because they're just not very stable to sit on or act with. So in a professional performance I would have crates made, but I don't want to take up any more of Chip's time and resources when we can just use these crates. Additionally, me and Imogen want to get rid of the camp chair and the log at the front of the stage and the fire, just because the set doesn't need it. It's going to be busy on the set anyway with all the people that we're going to have, but we are going to keep trees, maybe have them painted on a backdrop, or just have shrubbery dotted around, and we're still going to have vines wrapped around these risers here. So I just wanted to mention that, because what I've told Evie to do just forgets the mention of all of the set that we have, which is a little bit disappointing. So Leah's aim in this scene, as I think it is throughout most of the play actually, is to get Phil's attention. She does this by, let me just grab my script. So in this bit, she does this by asking whether he's interested in her, saying that she talks too much, talking about friends, and then talking about how the group scares her. And so yeah, I do think she's trying to get Phil's attention in any way that she can, really, because Phil doesn't seem to want to talk to her, which I think is detrimental to her, and ultimately it ends up in her leaving. That combined with Adam's death. So, where are we? We are in a field. So what I was thinking is that if we're in a field, there's like a little bit of a hill in the field, which is why they're set up on the rises. It also gives them a sense of hierarchy as Phil becomes the leader, and just the use of levels throughout this just helps, I think. What time of day it is? What I said before in my previous analysis blog of Jan and Mark coming out at about 11 AM, 12 PM, I don't think that works, just because in the next scene, Richard says that he's just come out of school, so I'd assume that everyone else has come out of school as well. So I just wanted to say that. So we're probably at the end of a school day, probably about 4 o'clock, maybe like 3:30 or something. As are Jan and Mark, as it could be that this scene and Jan and Mark's scene are taking place at the same time, as well as scene 3, section 1, with the original characters of Lou, Danny and John Tate, but now with the swapping of Lou with Mark and Danny with Jan. That wouldn't work in terms of timing. So what I did to help Evie, and to help myself sort of direct the scene is that I me and Evie split the monologue up into sections. So whenever Leah either changes subject or her energy levels drop a little bit, and it's sometimes the combination of both, the section changes. This is also called units and is a Stanislavski method, and because that's the practitioner that we're going for, I just thought it was something that we could do just to emphasise this practitioner a little bit more. So this first section, I'll pause it when it gets to the end of the section. Let's go. So, if this plays. So I'm just going to turn this up. Right, there we are. So where's Phil sat? In this rehearsal, I didn't want Kate to be there, just so that Evie could get to know her character a little bit more, and also so that she's not as nervous about performing it in front of Kate. So Kate will be sat around here on the riser next to her, eating an ice cream, as it says Phil does in the piece, and just looking a bit bored out to the audience, really. Yeah, on the risers, hierarchy. Yeah.
You can tell me, you know. You can talk to me. I won't judge. Whatever it is, whatever I won't. I won't. Is it me?
So what I was thinking here was that Leah is deliberately asking Phil if he's thinking about her, because it's evident that she thinks about him a lot and she's interested in him romantically. So I decided to have a little bit of a pause after whatever year, I won't. Just so that she can have a little bit of a think out to the audience and then turn and then conspiratorially sort of be like, is it me? So that, she's trying to portray that romantic interest across to the audience.
It wouldn't matter if you were.
So, what I asked Evie to do here was to make emphasis on the are instead of thinking. Unfortunately, as this was our sort of first recording of this scene, I think the nerves got to the better of her a little bit. So I wanted that line to be a are you thinking about me? Because Leah's getting excited about the prospect that Phil does actually like her back and wants to be romantically involved with her. So I decided to have Evie move here, just to initially have some movement around the stage, as Leah is very hyperactive as a character, and also gets her off the risers, and it shows that, yeah, she's not bothered. She's definitely not bothered that Phil likes her. That was sarcasm. She is bothered that Phil likes her, and yeah. So that was the end of the first section, and now we're going into the second section of the monologue. I decided to have that section there because in the next bit it's a big paragraph and it changes topic and it changes energy levels because Evie speaks really, really fast, which is what I directed her to do. So, the second section. So we are down stage right at the minute. I wanted to have her here because she's got easy access to go back to this riser in just a minute. I'd want her to slow down just a little bit there, but I think there could have been a little bit of miscommunication here, as I asked her to talk fast, but I didn't realise she'd be talking that fast and miss all the sort of quips, little sort of hesitations that Leah does have. So at the I'm admitting, I wanted her to sort of open her arms, be like, yeah, this is what I'm doing. I talk too much, and she knows that she talks too much, especially to Phil, because Phil does not talk to her. So I'd want this to be a little bit more natural, especially because as she walks back over here, it just doesn't seem as natural. When I was sort of working through the monologue by myself, it did feel a little bit more natural to go over there. So, but again, she's got a script in her hand, and we'd only just blocked the scene. So that just comes with learning lines and finessing the acting. So Leah looks over to Phil that you're not perfect actually, Phil, because she's just been on this rant. I don't think she's really looked at Phil, in all honesty. She looks at him for like a brief second during the whole I talk too much, so shoot me, so kill me, Phil. And as she's been in a little bit of a rant here, she wants Phil to sort of notice her, in a sense. So, yeah. So we've got a little bit of awkwardness there because Leah sort of expects Phil to say something to her, and he doesn't. So she's at a little bit of a loss what to say, and the energy drops right down again. Which marks the end of the section, but the section continues for a little bit. So that would need to be a little bit more natural, just how I did it, and it felt natural for me. I don't know if that's because I've gone over it a couple of times before, but it just needs to seem a little bit more natural. So at that point she can just walk straight backwards because she's not actually saying anything, or I wouldn't want her to be saying that much. I do think that we shouldn't be afraid of silences, which is something I'm going to tell Evie, I think. So she sits down here because she's lost her sort of momentum with what she's saying. She's done all this sort of crazy, I need you to like listen to me, and he's not. And so she's just sort of sat down, sort of dejected, doesn't really know what to say. And then something comes to her, and the energy picks up again, and that's when we begin section 3, which is now. So what I was wanting her to do here was to sort of lean across this riser here, and just sort of like look at Phil, and just like use her hands and stuff on the riser, just to be like, don't talk, no, 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 which is the sort of vibe that I'm getting from it. I know you can't see my hands. I'm doing a lot of hand gestures. So let's continue. So that's a pretty simple explanation to why I did that. Leah could walk out of here. she storms across the stage to downstage left, and this is the little bit I was talking about at the start, just with Leah sort of hanging off the stage in a sense. Yeah. So that pause just before I haven't got friends is the sort of same as the moment of awkwardness earlier in the monologue, where she says, "Oh, what's the line?" Which is the same as, "Because you're not perfect, actually, Phil." Okay, there, just that same awkwardness that she has because she's trying to bait Phil to say something and he's not, so she has to continue talking. So the gestures are great here from Evie. I think Leah uses her hands a lot to sort of emphasise what she's saying, which is what I asked Evie to do throughout the scene, but she does it perfectly here. Again, previously she's got the script in hand, so this will just come with a little bit of finesse, and when I ask Imogen to go over it with her, just to sort of change anything she thinks needs to be taken out, or just to finesse things, as we will do later in the process. So that movement, for you haven't either. I'd want it a little bit later. At it's not like Mr. Popular, because she's trying to come up with like something and she's directly referencing Phil. But I think she should stay down here just a little moment longer and then walk to the riser over here. So this little walk around the riser was just because I didn't know how to get her back over to this side of the stage, because I want her to do something over here in just a minute. I do think it's okay for her to walk around because she's not really saying anything of importance, and if we do remove the trees from here, I do think that should be fine. It's just what I need to ask Maya and then Hannah and Lauren as well. But I'm going to ask them that on Monday and we'll see what they say. And I may have to change that little bit to a walking in front of Phil, which may work just the same. It's just I think that's kind of cool for her to be walking around the riser. So this little knee thing is what I wanted her to come around here to do. Initially Evie did it more naturally, because I just wanted to be Leah to be sort of draping along the set. So yeah, that needs to be a little bit more natural, and she needs to do it for a little bit more longer. And then I think she should move it, embarrass us both. I'd want her to be a little bit more, I think I'd want her to have a little bit more energy here, just so it's kind of like a, you'll just embarrass us both, because it is different. It's different because it doesn't matter to you, does it? Sitting there all. So I want Evie to be a little bit more angry with Phil at this point. Well, I say angry, just like enthusiastic. And then when Phil doesn't sort of respond, she's run out of things to say, then there's the lack of energy. So I think there should be a pause here before she goes back to the riser. She should say the whole sitting there all, and then move in the little bit of a silence. silence isn't a thing to be scared of if it's used well. So that marks the end of section 3. And now we're moving on to section 4 because it's a drop in energy overall and it moves on to a new topic. Yeah. I think Evie should be getting a little bit more emotional here. So I asked her to stand up at any point during that, and we decided on the I'm not the only one, because she's building her energy back up again. And the reason why I asked her to stand up on the riser is because she hasn't stood up on the riser yet, and I just think it's an easy way for her to sit back down on this riser at the end of the scene. So Evie's doing brilliant here by looking back to Phil ever so often, which is good. So that's another brilliant awkward pause that Evie follows my instructions with there. Again, adds to the element of awkwardness that Phil isn't responding. So she sits back down here again because she's at the sort of end of her rant, and now she's again trying to be romantically involved. So here, Leah grabs Phil's hand, and Evie does a brilliant job at being indecisive at whether to do this or not. If you just let me just go back a little bit. So you can sort of see the indecision on her face, like now, especially with her hand here as well, which I think is absolutely amazing. I just told her to grab Phil's hand, and she added that in, and yeah, brilliant acting. So we decided to include the grab of the hand, which me and Imogen discussed prior to this rehearsal. So just to show Leah and Phil being romantically involved. So here, Phil pulls his hand away and continues eating his ice cream. Just sort of shows that he is a little bit disinterested in her, and sort of the unrequited love that Leah has for Phil, which eventually swaps round at the end where Leah does walk out on him. So that last line is sort of a she's despairing because she doesn't know what he is thinking because he hasn't given her anything to work on. So that was our first rehearsal. I think I did a pretty good job of that. I think I do need to be a little bit more clear in my instructions sometimes, but this will come with practice. So in terms of what was mine and what was Imogen's, there were a couple of moments that were primarily my input, but to be honest, a lot of it was our combined efforts. But especially as I've been sort of going through the monologue and adapting some of the movements that we added in, I would say that it is sort of my scene that I've directed. Obviously, I've directed it, but I'm going to be taking on sort of Leah and Phil's characters and how they sort of respond to things in the main group scenes, just because I've done this scene and thus want to continue with that. But so in next week's rehearsal, I'm going to be doing Leah's second monologue, and Imogen's going to be working on the first couple of sections of the group scene, and we'll come up with, and then in the following rehearsals we're going to be working on finishing the group scene, getting everyone to learn their lines, and running it again and again and again, and making sure that everything is as perfect as we can make it, and then introducing costume, lights and tech, and all the wonderful stuff like that. So that's it.